Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It's Marika Walsh in Ottawa, and I'll be moderating the press conference with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Minister of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion, Ahmed Hussen. We'll start with opening remarks from the Prime Minister and Minister Hussen, and then turn to questions. So far, there are no questions in the room, so it looks like we will have 25 minutes for questions from the phone. But first, we'll begin with opening remarks, starting with Mr. Trudeau. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui avec le ministre Hussen pour parler de logement sécuritaire et abordable. Every Canadian deserves a roof over their head. Since 2015, as a federal government, we re-engaged and we made historic investments in housing. But over the past 2 years, we've seen the pandemic increase the need for affordable housing, particularly amongst Canada's most vulnerable. That's why, working closely with municipalities and provinces and territories, we launched the Rapid Housing Initiative and invested $2.5 billion. We're now on track to create more than 10,000 new affordable units, exceeding initial targets. These new homes will support those who need it most, and it's a significant step towards the goal of eliminating chronic homelessness. L'initiative pour la création rapide de logements a été créée pour aider les gens en situation d'itinérance ou à risque de le devenir. Plus d'un tiers des 10 000 nouveaux logements sera dédié aux femmes et aux enfants les plus vulnérables. Par exemple, on sait que pendant cette pandémie, la violence conjugale a eu une montée très troublante.
We know that the pandemic has led to greater incidences of domestic violence, and that's why we've put that emphasis there. More than 40% of those housing units will be for Indigenous communities. Another thing that's great about the Rapid Housing Initiative is that it takes months to build new housing, not years, and we can respond to people's immediate needs. Last year, I visited Hope Living in Canada. It was converting the main floor for elderly people and for members of Indigenous communities. Communities have also purchased hotels and commercial buildings in order to convert them to rapid housing. This is a program that's working and that will continue to work.
One of the most transformative things a government can do is invest in housing, because with a roof over their head, people can build a better life. En terminant, je veux vous dire
To close, I would like to tell you that we are continuing to follow the situation in Ukraine closely. We are discussing with their government and our allies to see how we can support Ukrainians. This is why we can announce today that Canada will offer a loan of up to $120 million to the government of Ukraine.
$120 million to the government of Ukraine. Russia is aiming to destabilize Ukraine, including economically. This loan will help support Ukraine's economic resilience. Minister Joly discussed it during her visit, and we're also exploring other options to provide financial and other supports. I want to thank Minister Sajjan for his hard work to secure this financial assistance for Ukraine. And again, Canada calls on Russia to de-escalate and engage in meaningful dialogue. As we go into the weekend, I want to give a few words on last week's terrible hostage situation at Congregation Beth Israel in Texas. For Jewish families across the country, Shabbat begins this evening, and I know it'll be on their minds as they gather with their loved ones and in their congregations. I want to be very clear. Violence against Jewish communities is anti-Semitism and is always unacceptable. We will continue to stand against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate and extremism. And I send all my thoughts to families who are celebrating Shabbat tonight and reflecting on those terrible events of 1 week ago. Merci.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Minister Hussen now.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you, Prime Minister, for that introduction and for all that you've done to ensure that folks here in Ottawa and across the country have access to a safe and affordable place to call home. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Ottawa on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg peoples. Partout au pays, l'accès à un chez-soi sûr et abordable est une priorité pour de nombreux Canadiens. Having a roof over your head, Prime Minister, as you've indicated, is something many of us take for granted, but we have to make sure, as you've said, that our most vulnerable are not left behind. And let's face it, the pandemic has made things worse for the most vulnerable members of our society. Nous ne cessons de demander aux Canadiens de rester chez eux pour protéger leurs proches, mais qu'en est-il de ceux qui n'avaient pas de chez-soi pour commencer? We had to act quickly and safely to get shovels in the ground and people into homes. Nous avons mis au défi nos fournisseurs de logement et nos partenaires municipaux de nous aider à créer ces unités rapidement. And that's why today's news of creating over 10,000 new permanent affordable housing units through the Rapid Housing Initiative is simply historic, especially given that we just introduced this program just over a year ago. And, you know, that's 10,000 mothers, children, seniors, persons with disabilities, youth, and others that won't have to worry about finding shelter in these difficult times. Many units are also designated for women and children fleeing domestic violence and Indigenous peoples experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And on top of that, this Rapid Housing Initiative is also supporting thousands of good, well-paying jobs when they're needed the most. C'est donc une bonne nouvelle pour nos communautés, pour nos travailleurs, et pour notre economy.
And for our
economy. And that's the
economy.
National Housing Strategy at work. And before I conclude, I'd like to make one final comment. Today, we celebrate and recognize Lincoln Alexander. Today is Lincoln Alexander Day, which is a time to honor and recognize the significant contributions of Canada's first Black Member of Parliament, Cabinet Minister, and Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. Throughout his life, Link, as he loved to be called, exemplified what it meant to be of service to others, becoming a really passionate advocate for equality of Black Canadians and the advancement of education and youth issues. And it feels really fitting to be making this important announcement with you, Prime Minister, on this day, as Lincoln Alexander was known for his commitment to serving his community and country and looking out for the most vulnerable in our society. And next month marks the beginning of Black History Month. This year's theme is February and Forever, celebrating Black history today and every day, because Black history simply can't be summed up in a month. J'ai donc hâte de célébrer chaque jour les Canadiens noirs et les riches contributions qu'ils apportent à notre pays. And with that, I turn the floor over to you, Prime Minister. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for everything that you do.
We can start the press conference now, Marika. We can turn to questions.
Great. Thank you so much. As there are no questions in the room, we'll turn to the phone lines for 25 minutes of questions. Over to you, Maud. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time. If you have a question, veuillez appuyer sur étoile maintenant pour poser une question. Our first question is from Annie Bergeron-Oliver from CTV National News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hello, thank you for taking our questions. This is for the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Russian ambassador to Canada spoke to CTV News, and he scoffed at the idea of sanctions, saying that nobody cares about Western sanctions because they don't work and don't pose a threat. If Russia isn't concerned about sanctions, do you think the West needs to do more than just threaten economic harm to avoid an invasion in Ukraine?
We have actually seen over the past number of years that the sanctions that Canada and other countries have brought forward on Russia for its unacceptable incursion into Crimea and its continued interference in the sovereign affairs of Ukraine have had an impact on Russia, have had an impact on the Russian people. We know that the Russian people do not want to see Ukraine invaded, do not want to see deaths in a conflict that should be avoided. That's why we're calling on Russia to de-escalate calling on diplomatic conversations, but reminding everyone that we stand with the Ukrainian people, with their ability to choose their path forward for their country and thrive in the ways that they get to pick democratically.
Thank you for that. And my follow-up is also on Ukraine. There are new reports today that Canada is sending defensive equipment to boost Ukraine's military capabilities. What exactly is Canada sending, and how quickly will this assistance arrive?
We continue to lead an Operation Unifier, which is a training mission that the Canadian Armed Forces have been engaged in for a number of years now, that I got to visit personally in Western Ukraine a number of years ago when I was in the region. We have always been a friend to Ukraine. We will always be there with the necessary supports, and we look to continue to do that. Today, we're making a significant announcement of $120 million loan, which is one of the top things that the Ukrainian government has been asking for from Canada. The conversations that our foreign minister had with Ukrainian officials, including the Ukrainian president, stressed that, and we're happy to be there to reinforce the resilience and the strength of Ukraine's economy faced with Russian destabilization, including economic destabilization.
Thank you. Merci. Notre prochaine question est de Raymond Fillon de TVA.
Raymond Fillon, TVA.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. J'aimerais vous parler d'un autre type de logement, le 24 Sussex, parce que la Commission de la capitale nationale hier s'est dite inquiète, préoccupée, réclame une décision parce que l'immeuble se désintègre. Elle a soumis plusieurs propositions au gouvernement ces dernières années. Alors, est-ce qu'une décision s'en vient et sinon, pourquoi?
Les conversations continuent. On sait très bien que malheureusement,
we know that 24 Sussex has been neglected by many generations of politicians and prime ministers over the years. Unfortunately, it is in a terrible condition. This is a historic building.
Une certaine importance, mais il y a aussi des préoccupations profondes au niveau de la salubrité, mais aussi au niveau de la sécurité du Premier ministre et de sa famille.
And the safety of the Prime Minister and his family and future Prime Ministers. So currently, we are in consultations. We are assessing our options. And when we will arrive at a decision, we will share it with you.
Est-ce que vous comptez prendre une décision
Question,
dans ce
do you plan on taking a decision during this mandate?
Si vous choisissez de
Or are you
rénover la
afraid of being
maison du Premier
criticized
ministre
for renovating the Prime Minister's house? And how much it might
Je pense
cost?
que c'est très clair et je l'ai déjà
I think
dit.
it's very clear, and I've said it before, the current residence
dans laquelle moi et ma famille se trouvent est tout à fait
that my
adéquate.
family and I live in, and I have no intention of living in 24 Sussex, regardless of how long my mandate or my mandates may be as a Prime Minister. Indeed, it's something that needs to be reflected upon. We need to think about the future of the Prime Minister's residence. We are engaging with the National Capital Commission and other experts to make sure that we have a safe and stable environment for Prime Ministers, current and future. And also we have in mind the interests of Canadians.
Merci. Our next question is from Mike Lecouteur from Global News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Thank you again for taking our questions. I know you talked about other options that you're considering to send to Ukraine, but I wanted to know, what is the line for Canada to send weapons and or lethal aid to Ukraine? Is it a minor incursion? Is it tanks rolling over the border, or is it, them going into Kyiv?
We've been very clear that we support Ukrainian people. We support the territorial integrity of Ukraine. That's why we condemned, alongside the international community, the illegal annexation by Russia of the Crimea and their continued interference in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. we consider that the territorial integrality of Ukraine is important to be respected, and any movement of Russian troops into Ukraine will be absolutely unacceptable and met with a clear response from the international community.
Just in my follow-up, I'd like to know if you could actually address about weapons, but what I also wanted to ask following up is, over the last couple of days, there's been an attempt to define what is an incursion into Ukraine territory and what would constitute an invasion. Now, strong words and sanctions didn't stop that annexation that you were talking about in Crimea in 2014. So what is Canada's red line now, and what makes you think that Putin will take the West more seriously now than he did in 2014?
We have been engaged in significant diplomatic efforts as a global community and been very, very clear that it is not in the interests of Ukrainian people, it's not in the interests of the Russian people to see a conflict in which Russians and Ukrainian soldiers are killing each other, in which civilians are affected. Any incursion of Russian troops onto Ukrainian territory will be viewed as continued escalation and absolutely unacceptable, and the international community will respond strongly. As I've said a number of times, we continue to look for a range of different ways to support Ukraine. The announcement of $120 million in a loan to the Ukrainian government is one of the top things that they asked for. But we are, of course, looking to do more, and we will have more to say as the situation unfolds.
Thank you. Merci. Notre prochaine question nous vient de Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole.
Radio-Canada.
Go ahead.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau.
Hello, Mr.
Est-ce que
Trudeau.
le prêt que vous accordez aujourd'hui
The loan
signifie
that you're
que vous
granting
renoncez
today,
à
does it
l'envoi
mean
de matériel
that you are
militaire
not
et
going
des
to be
armes à court
sending
terme?
military equipment in the short
Non,
term?
au contraire,
Answer,
on est
no,
en train
much
de
to the
démontrer qu'on est
contrary.
là pour
We're
aider
demonstrating that we
le
are
gouvernement
there to
d'Ukraine
help
et le
the
peuple
Ukrainian
ukrainien
government
avec
and the Ukrainian
ce
people
qu'ils ont besoin.
by
Une
giving
des
them what
premières
they need.
demandes les plus
One
importantes qu'ils
of
avaient
the
pour nous,
most
c'était
urgent
pour de l'aide financière, et
requests they
on a
had
pu
was for
annoncer
financial
aujourd'hui
assistance, and we're
cette
able to
intention de
announce
faire un prêt de
that
jusqu'à 120
intention
millions de
of
dollars pour
giving
le
them a
gouvernement
loan of
d'Ukraine.
up to
Mais on sait
$120
qu'il y a
million.
d'autres choses dont
We
ils ont
know
besoin.
that
On
they
est en
need
train de
other
regarder
things.
qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire plus et
We are
comment on peut
looking
encore
at
plus
what we can
aider,
do
et
to
on
help
va sûrement
more.
avoir d'autres choses à
And of
dire
course, we'll have
dans
more to
les jours et les
say
semaines à
in
venir.
the days and weeks to come.
D'accord, alors je comprends que vous ne renoncez pas à l'envoi de
Question.
matériel
So
militaire et
you're
des
not
armes.
saying you won't
J'aimerais
send
traiter d'un autre
military
sujet
equipment
avec vous,
and
si
with
vous voulez bien.
weapons.
J'aimerais avoir
I
votre
have another
réaction au
question.
drame au Manitoba. Ces
What
4
is your
personnes
response
sont
to the
mortes de froid en
incident
essayant de
in
traverser la
Manitoba,
frontière.
those 4
Est-ce qu'il
people that
faudrait
died in the
ajouter,
cold trying
renforcer
to
des patrouilles à
cross
la
the
frontière
border?
d'après vous?
Should
Est-ce
we
qu'il
be
faut
adding more
sévir contre les
staff
passeurs?
to
Qu'est-ce
the
que vous en
border?
pensez?
What do you think?
Écoutez, ça a été une
Answer.
histoire absolument
This is
ahurissante.
an absolutely
C'était tellement
mind-blowing
tragique
incident. It is
de voir
absolutely
une famille
tragic to see a
périr comme ça,
family die in this
victime de
fashion.
trafiqueurs humains,
They're
victime
victim of
de
human
mésinformation
traffickers,
et
of
de gens qui ont pris
misinformation,
avantage de leur désir de
and
bâtir un monde
people who
meilleur.
took
C'est pour
advantage
ça que
of their desire to
nous
build a
faisons
better
tout ce que nous
life.
pouvons
This
pour
is why we're
décourager
doing
les gens
everything we
d'essayer
can
de
to
traverser la
discourage people
frontière
from trying to
de
cross the
façon
border
irrégulière ou
in
illicite. Nous
irregular or
savons
illegal ways.
qu'il y a des
We
grands risques à
know
ce
that there
niveau-là,
are
et c'est pour
great
ça que
risks in doing
d'ailleurs
so.
il y a des
This is
patrouilles
why we
régulières
have
pour
regular
essayer
patrols.
d'interdire
We're trying to prevent this,
d'appuyer des gens
and
qui prennent
we want
ces risques
to
inacceptables.
support
Évidemment,
people
nous
who are taking
travaillons
these
très
unacceptable
proche
risks.
avec le
We're working
gouvernement
very
américain
closely
sur les
with the
enjeux
United States government,
frontaliers, et
with
nous allons
our
continuer
border
de travailler
agents, and we
pour
will continue to
s'assurer
work
que les
to
gens
make
ne
sure
choisissent pas
that
la
people
migration
don't choose
irrégulière à leur
irregular
risque
migration tactics.
et à risque de tout notre système d'immigration aussi.
Thank you. Our following question is from Tom Perry from CBC News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hello, thanks for taking our questions. Prime Minister, can I ask you this loan? How is a loan going to deter Russia from invading Ukraine?
Well, thanks, Tom. One of the things that we're seeing Russia do right now is not just amass troops along Ukraine's borders, not just engage in cyber attacks and propaganda to destabilize, but actually engaged in economic destabilization as well. And one of the things that Ukrainian government has been clear is having additional financial resources to shore up their economy will be extremely important in terms of reassuring the Ukrainian people and standing strong against these Russian destabilizations. That's why we are there to support the government of Ukraine with $120 million as a loan. But there is, of course, more we are looking to do, and we will continue to work with them on that.
And just as a follow-up, I know that Canada is working with its allies to apply diplomatic pressure on Moscow. Has Canada, though, made any diplomatic overtures of its own to Russia to try to persuade Moscow not to invade Ukraine?
We have been unequivocal for many, many years now on the unacceptability, the illegality of a Russian incursion into Ukraine, whether it was in Crimea or in the Donbass, and its support for Russian separatists in that area, whether it's the accumulation of troops that they have on Ukraine's borders, or whether it's the attempts to interfere in the political processes in Russia. Canada has consistently expressed its concerns directly to President Putin and to Russian officials. And we are among the countries with the strongest regimes of sanctions in defense of Ukraine. We will continue to make very clear our concerns and our desire to see de-escalation of the situation and continue to use all means necessary to impress upon Russia the need to step down from their aggression.
Okay, I hope we have time for 2 more questions. If we keep questions and answers short, we will be able to fit in 2 more people. Thank you.
Thank you. Notre prochaine question est de Mylène Crête de La
Mylène
Presse.
Crête from La Presse. You have the floor.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Hello, Mr.
J'aimerais
Trudeau.
savoir à quoi vont servir spécifiquement. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner des détails? À quoi vont servir les 120 millions de dollars que vous
how the $120 million will be used by Ukraine?
C'est un programme qu'on a au niveau de Développement International Canada qui est là pour répondre et pour appuyer des pays
International Development Canada that
pour
supports countries that
des prêts souverains
qualify.
comme cela.
These
Il y a
are
des
sovereign
critères
loans.
assez détaillés
There
pour
are
pouvoir
detailed
offrir
criteria
ces
that
prêts-là.
determine whether or
Mais
not we can
certainement,
grant these
étant
loans.
donné la situation
But given the
avec
situation
la déstabilisation économique
with
agressive que la
the
Russie est en train
aggressive economic destabilization that is perpetrated by Russia against
contre
Ukraine,
le gouvernement d'Ukraine, contre le peuple ukrainien,
against the government and the
cet
people of
argent va
Ukraine,
être
this
important
money will be
pour aider le
critical in
gouvernement
helping the government
à créer de la résilience à l'intérieur de l'Ukraine.
build resilience within Ukraine.
Nous allons continuer de travailler avec eux
We will continue
pour
to work
protéger
with them
l'intégrité
to
de
protect
l'Ukraine.
the integrity of Ukraine.
En deuxième question, j'aimerais
Second
savoir,
question.
vous avez dit que ça faisait partie des 5 choses que
You
l'Ukraine avait
said
demandé.
this
Quelles
was
sont les
among
4 autres
5
choses
things
que le
that Ukraine
gouvernement
had
ukrainien
asked
a
for.
demandé
What
au
are the
Canada?
other 4 things that Ukraine asked for
Excusez-moi,
from
je
Canada?
pense que vous m'avez mal entendu. J'ai pas dit,
Answer,
pas
I'm
listé
sorry,
5 choses. Il y a
I don't
plusieurs
think you
choses
heard me
que le
correctly. I
gouvernement
said they asked for
ukrainien
many
a
things. I
demandé.
didn't say 5
Vous
things
en connaissez
specifically.
plusieurs et
You
nous,
know
on va
many of them,
continuer d'être là
and we will continue to be
veiller à
there
répondre
to
dans la mesure du possible
respond as
aux
best as we
besoins
can
d'Ukraine parce qu'on
to
va toujours
Ukraine's
rester
needs.
amis et alliés
We want
de
to remain
l'Ukraine
friends
et
and allies with Ukraine.
appuyer le peuple ukrainien
We
dans
want to
leur désir de
support the Ukrainian
choisir
people
leur
in their
avenir
desire to
sans interférence
choose
par la
their
Russie ou
future
d'autres.
without interference from
Okay,
Russia
this will
or
be the
others.
last question.
Thank you. Our last question is from Tonda McCharles from the Toronto Stars. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Thanks. Good morning. Prime Minister, on Ukraine, I'd like to understand, you say that you're looking at all other options. You're prepared even to send military assistance, further military assistance. But I've heard Joe Biden say that U.S. troops on the ground are not on the table here. I haven't heard you say specifically that about Canadian troops in any other capacity other than training. So how do you assess the likelihood that Canada could be drawn into a larger conflict that will require Canadian troops? And how do you think Canadians will view that?
Obviously, we are looking very, very carefully at all the different options and scenarios. It is extremely disconcerting to see the buildup of Russian troops, to see Russian aggression, Russian cyber attacks, Russian economic destabilization of Ukraine. This is something that nobody in Europe or around the world wants to see right now, and we are using all tools to try and encourage Russia to de-escalate, to solve this diplomatically, to not proceed at an engagement, an invasion, a further invasion of Ukraine territory. That's why we continue to stand strongly diplomatically in sanctions, but why we also continue to have Canadian troops in Ukraine as part of Operation Unifier to continue to ensure that the Ukrainian military is able to stand strongly in any incursion or invasion by Russian forces.
So I haven't heard you say that all tools and all options precludes further commitment of Canadian troops in any other capacity. Can you just be clear on that? Are you prepared today, as the U.S. has been, to say Canadian troops would not go into conflict in an offensive capacity to support Ukraine?
I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals. I'm going to continue to say what I have said, is that we are looking to support the people of Ukraine in the challenges they're facing against an aggressive Russia that has amassed troops at the borders, that is interfering in Ukrainian political affairs, that is using cyber attacks and propaganda to destabilize Ukraine. Canada has been and will continue to be a friend and ally of Ukraine, and we will continue to be there to support them and to ensure that Ukrainian people get to determine their futures, not Vladimir Putin.
Okay, that's all the time we have for our press conference today. Thank you so much to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and to Minister Ahmed Hussen and to Mode operating the phone lines. Have a good day.